without running numbers or doing anything, I was like, yeah, let's put in an offer. And, we got it accepted and we closed on it. It was a short sale. I was like, I don't know what that means. They were like, oh, it's going to take very long for us to close it. It ended up taking
you said it was short sale. That means
that's what I said.
Quick.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I thought it was going to be happen fast. And she's like, no. And, so she explained it. I still didn't understand it, but I executed on it and we closed on it with a VA loan.
You're listening to the Lever Up Your Life podcast. Each episode, I bring on guests to share their strategies and secrets for leveraging their knowledge, resources, and contacts to lever up their lives. We unpack real-world numbers, mistakes, and wins so you can flip faster, borrow smarter, and build wealth with confidence. Let's dive in.
Justin and I just wrapped up this episode, and I've known Justin for a while. We've done business together, but man, you want to talk about a guy that is committed and just really radically changed the way that he looked at his life by making commitments, sticking to them, doing hard things, and taking action. It's really inspiring. Justin is probably going to be, when you listen in, if you don't know Justin, you might be like, oh, this guy does a few deals. Like, Justin legitimately owns an entire segment of a market. Between his burr business, his fix and flip business, ground up construction, mobile home deals, his agent business, his team, he's absolutely crushing and taking over a market. And when you listen in, it's not going to be any mystery why that's happening. He's a man who's very committed to growth, very consistent, very disciplined. And I promise you will listen into this one, learn some things about real estate and underwriting deals, but come with a takeaway of how a guy can go from not knowing anything about real estate to, over the course of 10 years, completely changing his and his family's life. So tune in. You're going to love this episode and appreciate you guys watching as always. We are live for the Lever Up Your Life show, where I bring on guests to share their strategies and secrets for leveraging their knowledge, resources, and contacts to lever up their lives. This week, I have got the perfect example of a guy who has just completely leveled up in the last couple of years, and that would be Justin Noe. Welcome to the show, my friends.
Thanks, Jared. Good to see you again, and looking forward to the next time I get to hug your neck.
My neck, dude? Why my neck?
Just because, man, it's just something that we used to say to each other in the Marines that, hug your neck and all that good stuff. So just hadn't seen you in person in a while, so it's good to see you in 2D.
Dude, I know it has been a minute, man. For those of you listening in, Justin is the unofficial mayor of Brooksville. He runs that market. That's his jam. He does more deals in Brooksville than anyone I know. And I lived in Florida for like the last 3 years. I moved to Eastern Washington. But what we actually need to do, Justin, is you need to bring your family up to Schweitzer in North Idaho for some snowboarding. I want to get a bunch of my Florida friends up this winter. It's like pretty world-class quality and not the pricing of Colorado.
That's a fantastic idea. Do they take the Epic passes? Because if they do, I may be on board for that.
Yes. So I was actually chatting yesterday about this. There's like two main type of passes. Actually, let me look which one they accept, because doesn't that expire in like 2 days?
Yeah, we got ours a couple months ago.
Messages. It is the icon. Well, it might be the icon. Regardless, we'll make it happen.
Sounds like a plan. We already planned to go to Colorado and maybe Switzerland, but I'll throw Idaho in the mix.
That's a good mix. That's a good mix, my friends. So, Justin, I intentionally bring on guests who have levered up their lives. They aren't where they started, and that was done with a lot of intention. So, do you want to share your story with me and our guests or our listeners for like, what has been your journey? Where are you at now versus where you started?
Yeah, so we all start out as children and, probably take a little bit longer than you to get their stuff together. Specifically for me, it probably took about 10 years after graduating high school which I did and wanted to travel the world. So I joined in the Marine Corps, and, you can get into all kinds of various things. I wanted to, go see the world, which I did. I got into a bunch of crazy debauchery type things, and, living in different states and countries and traveling all over the place. Not really sure what I was going to be when I grew up, and, barely had a plan. And then, kind of fast forward a little bit till I was around 27, kind of like, got a book from my wife, and then, moved into getting a different mindset shift there, becoming more interested in learning about, wealth building and real estate and things like that. And then fast forward, started, buying up more properties and things, and then got to a space where I was doing well, doing better than most, but then really got to a place where I found this program that I started, and it really showed me that I was much more capable of doing a lot more and being a better human. And so, that really over the last few years has gotten me to where I am today. And it's been an exciting journey. It's been a challenging journey, and I've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking before we went live about the challenges of like good problems. There are good problems and there are bad problems, but in business, it's mostly good problems, which does take some mindset work to see it that way. Your story, there is a lot to unpack. You literally just gave half of your life in like 3 sentences. So let's just like rewind. So you're in the military, you're traveling all over, you're like, whatever, I'm living for the now. I want to see the world. This is how I can do it and get a paycheck, get the benefits, whatever. As your military, like, when did your military career end? And was there any point where in which that phase of life was starting to maybe wrap up that you're like, hey, I don't know like what it is that I'm doing here on this earth?
Yeah, feels like every day. But no, I officially retired about 2.5 years ago. But a big mind shift change of mine while I was was about 10 years in. I was transitioning from one duty station to the next. It was Christmas time, received a book from my wife, and, a couple of books actually. And so that was a big mindset shift right then and there. I found something that I could dig in on, something I could learn about, and something that interests me, and really use that to move on into my life, and started, kind of thinking about what I was going to do and transitioning in 10 years from then. Right. So I always think of things let me back up. I started right around then, start thinking about 10 years ahead. And so I got into this phase of life where I started thinking and planning ahead, because I had kids and a wife, and, what am I going to do with my life type thing.
Yeah. So why do you think your wife was like, hey, I know my husband's like never really gotten into these things before. Let me buy him a couple of books that's just going to completely change the way his life trajectory, where he's going. And I'm sure she didn't know that was going to be the case, but why do you think she was like even got you those gifts?
Probably because she thought I was a loser and wanted me to get better. But no, seriously, I think, she had been following this lady. Her name is, I think it's Charlene Johnson is how you say it. Or Shalene maybe. And anyway, she had been following her, and some of the advice she would talk about books and things that, her and her husband used to like, get their business growing and things like that. And she had mentioned, I don't know if it was a podcast back then, because this is like 2010. And so I don't even know if they had podcasts back then, but maybe it was like some kind of book or YouTube channel that she watched. And, 2 books that she recommended that all wives make sure their husbands read. And that was The Slight Edge, and then the most famous book for all real estate investors, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so that was the one that actually moved the needle for me. It was the first one I read. Then I just got hooked on, I guess self-development would be the way. Back then they probably called it self-help, but I wouldn't consider it that. It was more like self-development and growth, and like changing your mindset on things. And I got it for Christmas. And man, that turned me into an avid learner. I finally had found the types of books that interest me. Before then, like, I read, but, begrudgingly so, and very little.
Yeah.
So after that, I became more avid reader. And then in 2021-ish, I really became a big reader.
What's funny is, so I read that book. I was probably 21, but when I read it, I remember reading it in the back of my parents' car, driving down for Christmas to visit family. That's when I read it. Read the whole book in the car. If you haven't read it before, I mean, you can literally read this book in a couple hours. Like, it is intentionally extremely simple. So what, from reading that book, like, had you ever done a business before? Had you ever tried to start any of your own things? Were you entrepreneurial as a kid? Or was this just like, oh my God, like the way that I look at the world has just changed?
It was a huge shift, man. My parents did own rental properties, but they both worked 9-to-5 jobs. We had lived in one of the rental properties before they purchased their other home. And then it was kind of cool. We actually still own them today. And, my family, nice. We all own them today and, and all that kind of stuff. And my brother and I partnered with my parents on it in 2020. We fixed them all up and we grew the rents from like $700 gross out of all 3 units to like $3,000 within just a couple months of rehab and putting some know-how into it. So, but it all started right then. And it took me a while to really get to that, but it literally shifted my mindset on how to perceive wealth, how to look about growing your wealth, how to plan for that kind of stuff. And it really got me dialed in. I started ordering all kinds of books and reading all kinds of things and studying more and more, talking to people about it and really developing in 2011, really spent a lot of time developing my ideas on it. And how I wanted to proceed and pursue that moving forward.
Got it. So 2010, read the book, and then into 2011, you're actually starting to things are changing up here, but they're not yet changing out here. What, from that point in time, how long did it take you to actually take action on what it is that you were learning?
Yeah, so we were transitioning from one duty station to the next, and we were going to buy a house when we got to the new duty station. I mean, literally, we were in transition, and we already had something locked in on base and everything else. I get there, hey, does anybody know a realtor? In the book, that's what they said we got to find. So we get introduced to a realtor who I actually still have a relationship with today, and I actually send referrals to them today for people that move to that area. So it's pretty cool. I've actually sent them 4 or 5 different deals, so it's pretty good.
Let's go.
But they were great. They helped us out. And then, when we later on in 2020, we ended up selling that property to invest down in Florida, but they helped us then. So, but it all started in that transition, and we got there in January of 2011. And by August, we had purchased our first home that we had ever bought. Wow. And this is, at the bottom of the market. Prior to that, I actually had quite a bit of money that I had saved up. And then also re-enlisted twice, and got a tax-free bonus for $50,000, then got another bonus for $25,000. And I had money in the stock market. I put it in there at the best time possible in January of 2008, and watched it take a tank to half of its worth. And so I was just man, all the money I had in the stock market is gone. And so I was kind of in this space where I was pretty down and out. I wanted to pull the money out and really thought it was all a scam. And then luckily I found Rich Dad Poor Dad, or my wife did, and gave it to me, and really helped me shift my mindset. But I was on the warpath. I found the realtor. We looked at all kinds of different houses, and there was this neighborhood that we had Marine friends that lived in. They had their kids. We had been at the same duty station previously, and that we all kind of moved around the same time. And they were already living in this spot, and we knew the neighborhood, and we knew them. And there was a house that they knew was for sale, and it was cheap. And it was man, it was actually being rented out by a lady too. So we got to chat with her, at the house, and we're like, well, what are you renting it out for? And she's like, $1,500 a month. And I knew nothing about renting anything, outside of my parents hated doing it, when I was growing up. No. And so I was like, $1,500. I was like, wow, that sounds pretty good. My payment, estimated to only be $750. I mean, math for Marines here, I'm going to be able to make some money on this property. So, without running numbers or doing anything, I was like, yeah, let's put it in an offer. And, we got it accepted and we closed on it. It was a short sale. I was like, I don't know what that means. They were like, oh, it's going to take very long for us to close it. It ended up taking
you said it was short sale. That means
that's what I said. Quick. Yeah, I was like, oh, I thought it was going to be happen fast. And she's like, no. And, so she explained it. I still didn't understand it, but I executed on it, and we closed on it with a VA loan. Got money back at closing or after closing. So I was like, man, I must be a wizard. This, Rich Dad Poor Dad book, turned me from a nobody to a somebody.
Yeah. Buys one deal with negative money into the deal and cash flowing. I mean, you're probably cash flowing $500 a month.
Yeah, I mean, at that time I didn't know. We lived in it, right? We fixed it up and we lived there for a couple years, and then because we used the VA loan, that's why we were able to get money back, 0% down, all that kind of stuff. But we ended up turning in that, and that was our first rental property. When we PCS to the next location, we had that home, and it was our first way to start building wealth.
So after you get the first one, I mean, obviously you're living in it, right? Why buy another one? And how long did it take you to do that?
Man, I kicked myself in the butt, because I did go back with that realtor, and I was like, hey, I want to go find more properties. Like, that was my goal. And so I started looking around, and I found like this 7-plex, and it was a big job. There was no way I could have actually done it.
Single family, like, let me pick up this 7-plex. I got it. I'll fix it.
Yeah, like that's what I was thinking, right? I walked the place. I was like, oh wow, like we could do all these stuff, and then they wanted a lot of money for it. It was like close to Baltimore, and I wasn't really too sure about the area. And there was a dude sleeping in the middle of the floor on one of them. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's a good idea. So luckily, I didn't buy that one. But I should have bought something, because everything was on discount. Had I learned about Bigger Pockets back then and had a community to go to and learn, I probably would have bought way more properties. But instead, I ended up focusing on my career. I had a very intense job at the time. I was working at the National Security Agency, and then I got selected to become an officer in the Marines. And so then I had to go to training for that. And then I really wanted to focus on making sure I was good there. And then, kind of put it on the back burner, moved to California, was going to buy another house, man. And I kicked myself in the butt for not buying a house there, because had I just held on to it while we were there for 3 years, I would have easily walked away with $200K after the sale. Easily. Doesn't matter what house I would have bought. But the realtor I spoke to was like, oh, we're like in a bidding war. And then I was just kind of worried that I would overpay and then the market wouldn't appreciate. And so fear-based decision there, learned a lesson, and then didn't purchase again until 2016. And it just so happened to be another short sale in North Carolina when we moved there. So, my first two, deals were short sale deals in 2 different states.
Nice. So basically there's a 5-year span of your mindset had changed. You took action right away, but kind of get pulled away with your career. You're not really understanding what's happening in the real estate market, nor do you really have the guidance except for realtors. And as I'm sure that you would attest to, guidance from realtors and depends.
There's a lot more misses than hits. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Not every realtor is on Justin Noe's team. That's how I'm going to phrase that. So you go by your second one, and this one is probably what you're going to owner occupy again and kind of fix it up, live and flip.
Correct. Yeah, it was a house. It was a cool house. It was bigger. It was on an acre and a half. It was in a really cool little town area, and it needed a really big reno. I had this thing about popcorn ceilings. I hated it, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna scrape off all the popcorn ceilings, and then I'm gonna put in new floors. I'm gonna paint this place. I was gonna hire a painter. Because painting, I hated it. I did a summer of it in high school, and just I'm never doing that again.
Dude, it sucks.
Yeah. You have to be good at it. You have to be willing to be patient. And that ain't me.
Justin, do you see this line right here? Yeah,
it looks great.
That would be me. It only looks great because it's blurry. I promise it's not good.
Yeah. And then I got about halfway through scraping the paint or the popcorn ceilings off, and the painter says, well, I could do that for you, and I'll do it for $1 a square foot or whatever he said. And I was like, sold, man, take it. And then what took me 3 days to do half the house, it took him a half a day, and he was skimming it the next. And it was just so much easier. So I learned more about hiring people on that project that did stuff better than me and faster than I could. However, I'm still learning my lesson, because I was putting in floors, and what would have taken a flooring company maybe 2 days to do, it literally took me 14 days, and my back, I thought it was never going to heal. I was in the Marine Corps for 20 years and, had back stuff here and there, but, that probably, put me over the top, I think,
Yeah. So if you've got veterans disability, it's from the flooring, not from the actual service.
Well, I think it didn't help, it didn't help,
Yeah.
all the other injuries that, come about with, running and lifting and doing all those things.
Yeah.
But bending over something for 14 days straight is just ain't healthy,
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because one of the things I hear as a hard money lender all the time, I'd be like, hey, this is like an 80 grand reno. Like I'm not going to set you up with a 50K budget. It's just not it. And then the response I hear back, it's from probably 1 in 3 people. Oh, no, it's fine. I'm going to do it myself. 30 grand cheaper. As somebody who has grown and scaled the real estate business far beyond what most people will ever achieve in their real estate career in a very short amount of time, what would be your advice to people who say, oh, I'll just do it myself, it's cheaper?
Man, if you are good at it and you love it and you just like doing that kind of stuff, then by all means go and do it. But if you are somebody that's doing it only to save money, you're not technically really going to save money, because your time is money, and if you aren't good at it, it's going to take you at least twice as long. In my case, it took 7 times as long, and I literally would have to cut things 3 times because I would be nervous that I would like undercut it, and I didn't want to waste the wood and all the other things. So like it was such a process. Luckily, I had really good buddies that would come over at night and still kind of like put in a couple hours with me. I remember one of my really good buddies, Dan, and we had this one piece that we had to cut around the doors, like this weird little angle piece. It was very tight. And, that really, stood the test of time on our friendship at that point in time. And it was like, Justin, if it doesn't get on this cut, I'm gone. I'm out of here. And he got it on the last cut. He got it in, and it was fantastic. So,
that was the make or break for the friendship.
Yeah, well, no, not really, but it was funny because it just kind of tested it a little bit, and we both had a good laugh about it afterwards. But it was fun.
1 year later, it was funny. Yeah. So. Okay, we're like at house number 2. You've learned a couple of lessons so far. One about buying rentals, and then lesson number 2 on the second house is about I can't do stuff that I suck at in scale. So how do you go? Like, if you don't mind me asking, what are you at right now for door counts and number of flips you've done? And like, granted, we're from 2016 to now is less than a decade. Where are you at right now?
Yeah, and I didn't even, so we bought another couple homes in between 2016 until 2020. We bought another house in that area, turned that property into a rental. And then in 2019, I had gotten orders to a new duty station. And so we were deciding whether or not to sell our current house. We decided to sell it and buy a new house. And then in between that transition, we came to my hometown, which I never thought I was ever going to live in again, which by the way, I do now. And I never thought I would invest down here, which I do now. But, so I always look at it, God had a plan, right? And so we didn't find anything on the trip to Colorado. We did eventually we saw the home that we eventually purchased. We just never thought we were going to be able to buy it at the time because our timelines. So anyway, we started in 2019, my wife and I on that trip. We came back, we get our kids, driving them around. We ended up finding a house. We call on it. It was like $70K. And I was like, oh my God, I could buy that right now. And I was like, this is a deal. And mind me, this is like 2019 in Florida. The market was still kind of recovering from where it had earlier in a couple decades almost before.
Yeah.
And so we call on that one. She's like, that one's already under contract. And she's like, but I got some more. We chose one. We looked at it. We only looked at one. And we went and put an offer in on it later that weekend. Ended up being a friend of mine's brother from high school, which was funny.
Oh, no way.
And then we bought the house, and it needed some minor repairs. We were out of state, so we hired somebody to do that. And man, that was so much easier to do things, hiring people to do. And then turned it into a rental right away, found a tenant, and bam, that thing was cash flowing a few $100 a month. My payment was like $380. I mean, it was insane.
Oh,
yeah. And so then I took that deal. And I had started an accountability group with one of my now business partners. He's also a Marine. His name is Nate Cherubini. He's a great human being. And he I was like, hey, Nate, check this property out. He's like, man, you're from there. You're biased. I'm like, no, dude, I swear, like, I would never invest there until I found this deal. And like, look what it's doing. And I was like, super excited. So he's like an analyst type guy, with like, nerding out. We're both Intel officers.
Your buddy Nate, you're like telling him all about Brooksville and investing here. He takes a look at it. What happens next?
Yeah, we ended up buying 2 more properties together. One of them ended up being a dump, or dumper, right? We put a lot of money into it, spent a lot of time, all of 2020. So all the bad things that you could have in a deal happened. Contractor failed us, city failed us. We ran out of money and we sold it for $120,000 loss. Really thought we were like, losers, spent a whole year of our life. It really sucked, man. But we had some other successes in real estate. We, that same year, my brother and I partnered with my parents. We had a successful project there. We got that one done.
Yeah. I think one important lesson in if you're fix and flip, right, you will lose money on a deal. It's a matter of time. Everyone, even the best investors that we know, I don't know anyone who doesn't occasionally get hit on a deal. Like, it happens. One of the things that I think is critical, though, is this was deal number 7 for you, and you guys took an absolute bath on it. The problem that people really get themselves into is if you win on your first 10 deals, you're like, dude, I'm going to do 5 of these at once, and you take a bath on all 5. That's where people really get messed up. And so there's this balance of, yes, I want to scale. And when you do 1 successful, then, if you're using leverage, that usually means you can buy 2. You do 2 that are successful, then you can usually buy 4. And that's really how people get rolling, right? But you have to be really careful in this game. There's a balance of leveraging for growth versus eventually chilling out a little bit and not risking. It's all short-term debt. You only get these things for 12 months. Hopefully you're doing deals in a market like Brooksville. Most of them you could turn into rentals and be fine. Doing some areas of St. Pete where you can't Airbnb and ARV is $700K, this dummy is doing, you got one exit. You got one exit. You're selling that thing and you're going to take a big price cut if you have to. So my question for you would be how are you balancing growth versus also, not putting you and your family in financial risk if the market were to change dramatically in the course of 6 months or a year? Really, there's 2 really big takeaways that I have. And if you listen to this whole podcast and you're looking for stuff specifically for advice on how to do deals the right way, this is hone in on this, because a lot of people don't pay attention to what Justin specifically just mentioned, which I want to dive into more. And then the other part of what you should chase, because there are, in my opinion, not great metrics to chase, which would be total profit margin. That's not a great one to chase. The other one would be your total return. So I put 50K into this deal and I get 100K net back. If you're watching this and you're really specifically trying to get stuff about real estate, I want to focus in on this section, in particular, 2 things that Justin had just mentioned to dive a little bit deeper. So number 1, running scenarios. So I, in a similar way, Justin, run scenarios. I do my best realistic, everything goes as planned. And I'm still trying to be conservative with reno and ARV, but hey, we sell at comps. We're on for our reno budget. And, if you can get a flip live in 4 months, that's a full reno. That's pretty good. If it's something light, you can do 1 to 2 months. But everything works out perfectly. This is what the numbers look like. And they need to sing. They need to look really good. On conservative expectation, if we did this would be a little bit worse than what I think, but it's conservative. That, in my opinion, depending on the price point, you should be hitting at least 10% margin. 500K house, I want to see net, insurance included, all the stuff, 60K minimum. And then on your downside, I'm probably not as conservative as you on the downside. I want to see worst case scenario. Realistically, I have to hold this for 12 months. I sell it under the comps. The market gets worse. Reno budget runs high. I want to be making at least 10 grand, if not 20. If that number is negative, deals killed. If you do that, you're going to position yourself really well, not just for that deal, Because what happens is after you sell, now you can look back at your original underwriting and be like, dude, I was wearing rose-colored glasses. Like, I didn't comp this right. Like, this doesn't line up with the actual numbers. If you don't do that, you're gonna have a really hard time learning what mistakes that you made. I don't know. Do you do that on your projects?
Yeah, we do like to go back and look, hey, where did we, and we track it, right? We've got this thing, we've got it from like Adam Whitney. We've also used some stuff that James has sent us, and we put it in there. And yeah, we always try to go back and look, hey, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? And, try to like, how do we get better? So always reevaluating the play that we just ran and then try to optimizing it for the next play. And so, yeah, you've got to do that because that's the only way you're going to get better on it and, become more profitable, more efficient, all that good stuff.
Yeah. The second thing that I want to touch base on that is that you just mentioned, if it's a really heavy lift and I'm making the same amount of money on a really heavy lift versus something that's a light cosmetic reno, paint inside, outside, flooring, replace the cabinets, whatever it is. I'm cool making less on something I can get live in a couple of weeks versus something that's a 6-month reno. The one thing I think that a lot of people miss, everybody likes to focus on that total profit. But what is it that what is the metric that you're chasing on your deals in terms of like, how do you tell if something's good or bad? What's the metric that you personally, I'll tell you what I pay attention to, but I'm curious what you pay attention to.
What metric ask the question again?
So when you're looking at a deal, what's like the financial metric that you're paying attention to? Is it cash on cash return? Is it total net profit? Is it, I would be shocked if you told me it was IRR, but I guess you could look at your IRR, your payback period. Like, what is the metric that you're like, this is what I care about. This is what I want to hit.
The profit number, right? So, and it's like, we try to hit like 10% of the overall deal, right? So if it's a 500K flip, we want to see 50K on that, where that middle number is, right? That's where we kind of try to go at that middle number. Like, hey, I'm fairly, very confident, not fairly, but very confident that it can hit that number. And then, the higher up it goes, just the better that it is. And then at that lower number, like, hey man, we're going to at least get 30K on that. So that's kind of like the deal that we're at now. So it's really just about what we honestly believe. And again, it's like you kind of mentioned before, and I think I may have alluded to it, but I'll be more clear, is we are being conservative on all of our things. So it's like, okay, the reno is going to cost us on this one $25K. That's what we think we can do it for. Our estimates came in, we can do it for that. Our holding costs are this. We think it's really going to be like 28K, for holding and all that kind of stuff outside of, what we pay off the lender and all that kind of thing. But, so we're going to budget for that to be, 33,000. So we're giving ourselves a 5K buffer in case, and I say in case, but like every time something comes up, when something, happens, that we're able to do that. Maybe we had to hold it an extra month. So, that ate into, more insurance costs or whatever the case is. But, that is the number that we're looking at. That is what we stare at every single time, is what is our net profit going to be to the deal, right? So after everything's done, like, what is our net profit going to be? Because we have to be able to go stand on that to our investor and say, hey, look, here's all the comps. This one right here is the best comp that we have. It sold at 525. We're going to list ours. We're prepared to list it at 505 to 515, depending on where we're at in the market at that point in time.
Yeah.
So we're already being more conservative with that number. And that's at the most likely case scenario. Again, across the board, we're trying to do that. We always go to the investors is like, hey, we think we can do this in 120 days or less, but ultimately our real goal is 90 days. Like, that is what we try to press for on every one of our flips is, can we do this in 90 days? And if the answer is yes, then then we're taking that. So we're really, 6 months is way too long for us. We want to turn and burn. We're not big rehabbers. Like, we will do things like major items, like, we've done sewer repairs, we've done septic replacements, we've done roof repairs, we've done big ticket items. However, those are items that can be done quickly. So it's not necessarily stuff that we're like, want to get bogged down in. We did have a flip earlier this year that bogged down way longer than we wanted to. but our contractor that we had, were working with, he had a vacation planned already, so he had to go on it, and it was like a 2-week one, and it was almost done, and like his guys were supposed to finish it up, and like the next weekend, well, they got put on a different job, and then he's not there to like herd the cats, and then it took a couple weeks longer than we had wanted it to, but we still, even with that delay, and it sat on the market longer than we wanted it to, we got it sold in 105 days. So it was from the time we bought it to the time we sold it. So it was still a quick turnaround.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of brings up the point on like what you look at for profitability is not just like net profit, but how long it takes to get you that. So the thing for me is like annual cash on cash return, annualized, which is like, hey, if I make 100 grand, but it takes me a year to get it, that sucks compared to getting 100 grand, but it takes 3 months to make. And so when you're looking at your deals, it's not just like, oh, what's the profit? It's like, dude, if you have to rezone something and add an addition and pull all these complicated permits, like you need to be making way more money on that because your capital is just sitting there and you can't touch it. Once it's in a deal, it's in a deal.
Exactly.
So.
And that's probably one of the biggest factors too. Money is obviously what you're trying to do in a business, but speed with money. So velocity of money, you probably heard that term before in the lending world. Yep. How fast you can take $1 to make another dollar to make another dollar, that kind of thing. So we want that money to churn. We've got one of our investors that started investing with us earlier this year, like I think January, February, when we did our first deal with them. And we've already used that same money. We're going to be on our third project with them this year. So nice. Not only are we, being able to, get our stuff faster and get more revenue into our business, but our investors are getting their money back and then they can put it back to work. So then they can share in more profits so they can be more profitable in their lending business.
Yep. 100%. To kind of pivot away from like back to more mindset stuff. I know that for you specifically in your journey, 75 hard has been something that's really changed you. And I actually didn't realize that. I knew you were an advocate and that you did 75 hard. I didn't realize how big it was for you in your journey until preparing for this podcast. Cause like, dude, I mean, you're a Marine, like you've gone through a lot of stuff. You're obviously mentally and physically tough, but it sounds like this really helped you level up. So what was it about 75 hard that changed you? Why are you such a big fan of it? Do you encourage other people to try it? Like, fill me in on how that's impacted your story.
Yeah, first off, I don't, recommend anyone try it. I just recommend them do it. So if you're going to commit, go all in and get it done. The guy who created the program, Andy Frisillo, will say the exact same thing. So I listened to his podcast in 2021, and then I didn't start the program until beginning of 22. And in that point in time, we had just came off of a really good year in our rental business. I had gotten my license earlier that year. I'd already gotten some sales done. I always felt like I was doing good in my life. All of these things. I learned how to, snowboard and do all these other kind of cool things, And I knew that I wanted more though, right? After listening to his podcast and a couple others, I was working on my mindset and I just wasn't ready to pull the trigger. And I was like, the old mindset of me was like, well, I'll do it in January, the new year, all the same things that, everyone does. So I did it and I committed to it. And my wife ended up doing it with me. And within like a month of us starting, it was like within a month, my second oldest daughter ended up getting some weird neurological functional disorder. And so she literally couldn't walk. It was weird. She went from being a healthy kid that was snowboarding with us over New Year's break, and like a couple weeks into the program, boom, we're like having to take her to the children's hospital, not knowing what's going on, all this other kind of crazy stuff. And we had started the program and we committed to it, my wife and I both. And we stayed going through the program. She would be at the hospital, I would come relieve her, and then she would go for her exercise, and then I would take care of the kids, and then all this other crazy stuff. And so we were doing that. I then, was transitioning from Colorado to Florida, and I was like still executing on the 75 hard stuff. And I was like a changed person. People were like, whoa, what are you doing? Oh, just, you can have a drink, you can eat this. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I said no, and I meant it. And I said I was going to complete this program and nothing's going to stop me. Nothing. Like, that's kind of how I looked at it, right? And that's kind of how he mentions it. And so when I got through all of those temptations to just quit, I had the easy story. You know, my daughter was sick in the hospital. Everyone would use that to be like, I'm going to stop and I'll start up later.
Yeah.
You know, I'm, you know, trying to transition down to Florida. It's hard. I'm going to stop. And so, but I didn't. And I kept going, and I went longer than, you know, I had to. I think I ended up going like, you know, close to 90 days or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it got my brother to do it. My wife did it. And like some other buddies did it. And, you know, it really kind of compounded on each other. And after 75 Hard, he actually has a follow-on portion of the program, which is called Live Hard. And there are 3 more phases to it. So I wasn't sure if I was going to do it, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to commit and do it just like I did 75 Hard. And I finished the other 2 phases. I got to phase 3, and in phase 3, if you fail it, you can't start over again in phase 3 because it has to be the last 30 days of the year from when you started. Day 14, right before Christmas, I normally get up in the morning and read and do all my stuff in the morning. Well, that day I had only read 6 pages, came home, did my second workout, sat down on the couch, ate dinner, whatever, forgot to read my last 4 pages, failed it, woke up the next day and realized it, and then started 75 Hard again and started the whole year-long program again. Get all the way to the end of that year, and the diet that I chose didn't allow for fruit, no like sugar, you know, like fruit included, and got to my new house that I had purchased, and there was fresh fruit trees, you know, growing there. My buddy ate one, and he's like, "Oh, try it." I was like, "Yeah." I popped some. I was like, "Oh, this is so great." And I was like, "Oh man," I you know, so I failed that year, and then I had to do it again. So it took me 3 years to really get through the program. But what I learned about that is that I committed to something, that I went through challenges. I went through very tough spots in my life, like, you know, with my daughter, with the moves, with all the crazy stuff of, you know, transitioning from the military into real estate full time, and, you know, what that meant for me, defining, you know, growing a business and all these things. It just proved to myself that I can do whatever I put my mind to if I get after it and I don't quit. If I don't give up and I just get after it every single day and don't give myself any excuses, I'm going to be able to achieve things. And so while I was tough before and I was doing well, I could have been doing more. And that is what I learned, is that I was capable of more, and I was not living up to what I was capable of.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people, like, obviously most people are not doing 75 Hard 3 times because they ate a piece of fruit at their new house and it messed up their commitment, right? Like, I think it's safe to say that you're on the extreme example of like commitment, discipline, etc. But, you know, the reality is, to change your life and lever up your life, that you don't have to be all the way here. But if you look at most people, they're over here and they're sitting on the sidelines. They're watching their life pass them by, and their dreams slowly decaying until they're fully dead. And so I have 2 questions for you. One would be, why do you think that so many people live their life this way? And then if they are living their life this way, like, what's something that they could do today to like reverse course?
Yeah. Something hard every day. I don't know what that hard could be for you today. May just be getting off the couch and going for a mile walk, right? Or your hard could be like, you need to go and run 5 miles. Whatever that is, you need to get out there and do something hard. Exercise is a great way to start building that mindset. You know, the Marine Corps, obviously, you know, they break you down with exercise all the time. And they, you know, really try to like strengthen your mind various ways to make you tougher. So I had like a baseline there. But what 75 Hard was for me doing something myself because I wanted to do it. And so that was a hard challenge, and program is what he calls it. And I call it that as well. But, you know, that if you do something and you stick to it and you prove to yourself that, like, no matter what, like whatever the conditions are, you're still going to go and you're going to do the thing you said you were going to do. Why? Because you said you were going to do it. And it doesn't matter that you said it to Jared. It matters that you said it to yourself. And it doesn't matter if you disappoint somebody else. It only should matter if you disappoint yourself. And more importantly, if you disappoint God, right? So, you know.
Yes. Dude, 100%. Man, I could get into it. Like, this is very closely aligned with a big like mission and vision I have for a youth program that I want to start in the next couple of years. But it's literally centered around like you will go climb this very difficult peak. And after you do that, something you probably thought you never could do, no one will ever be able to take away from you that you went out and you did this very difficult thing and you saw the summit. For me personally, like one of the hardest things I ever did was do a through hike on the Highline route of the Wind Rivers in Wyoming. So hard at first physically, but then mentally. And I don't know, man, what it does to you and the character that it builds, it's like it brings something into your life that can't be taken away. And with the concept of this show being levering up your life, like, man, that's how you do it. You know, you got to ask yourself, when was the last time like you were actually scared, or you were actually pushed, or you actually were at the breaking point with something? If it hasn't been for a long time, you're probably leaving things on the table with who you could be. And I know you just brought up, you know, not wanting to disappoint or let down God. I know that I didn't realize that it wasn't until 2021 that you gave your life to Christ. And so what was, like, at this point in time, man, like you're turning the corner with your business and your career and with your family. What made you like even want to open up your heart to Christ or go down that path? What's the story there?
Yeah, I would say I grew up as like a Christian, right? You know, as a lukewarm Christian, I guess, if you will, or maybe like luke-cold is a better word to put it. And, you know, and Christian in name only, right? You know, I was a part of a church and didn't really attend unless my mom made me, and went to youth group to like hang out with my friends and, you know, meet girls, whatever. And then, you know, in the Marine Corps, the times that I would turn to God was when I was scared, or, you know, something new, or, you know, something negative was happening in my life, or whatever the case was. And then, you know, I had started to kind of go to church again, right? When we lived in North Carolina, you know, found one that we liked, and we would go there once a month, maybe twice a month, you know, if it was really filling up to it, and we weren't hungover. And so in 2021, you know, we started to have more growth, right, in our business and in our life, and, you know, all these other kind of things. You know, COVID was still happening. Kids were at home. We had more time spending with them. And, you know, then my family, you know, went to Sweden to visit my wife's family. That's where she's from. And I couldn't go because I wasn't vaccinated, and, you know, all of the travel regulations at the time were all BS, and I wasn't a citizen, so I couldn't go, but my kids could go. So I had to stay at home. And, you know, when you go there, they normally would go for 6 or 8 weeks, and then I would, like, you know, wait 2 weeks and then go, and then, you know, come back a couple weeks early, and then they would come back. So it wasn't like I was that much time away from them. But on this trip, I couldn't go. So they were gone for 8 weeks. And I'm at home by myself. And, you know, everybody's like, oh, it's going to be great. You get the whole house to yourself. And I was like, yeah. And then a day goes by, and then you're like, this sucks, you know? And so, you know, spent the first couple nights like drinking and, you know, waking up like hungover and just thinking like, this just isn't how I want to live, man. And so, you know, really leaned in with our church that was there, and then really was like, I'm going to do what I've always said I was going to do that I, you know, haven't done yet. And so this is pre 75 hard, mind you, but started to listen to that podcast and was just really searching for something more. And, you know, God was calling, and he always is. And so I know that now, and, you know, focused on him and spent that time like really getting into the word, you know, reading, going to church by myself, you know, learning, and then becoming more in tune with that, accepting, you know, Christ in my heart, you know, for real this time, not just saying the words, and really feeling that way. And while I have continuously, you know, sinned and let him down since then, I have only gotten stronger in my faith and really stronger in all of my convictions with the Lord and what Jesus Christ provides to us, and what he has done for me and my family, and how it's changed us all together with everything. Like, when I put him first, like everything just works out, and I just know that it's going to work out. And it took me a little while over, you know, since 21 to really understand that too. And, you know, I think it's just going to always progressively become more and more of learning and becoming better, right? That's what we do.
Yeah, man. It's like, I'm leading a group right now on this book, The Purpose Driven Life, if you've never read it. But one of the purposes in your life is spiritual maturity. Like you'll always feel like you're lacking if you're not growing in your relationship with Christ. My take, biblically supported take.
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. As a quick reminder, if you want to connect with me and chat about doing some fix and flip or ground up construction deals together, message me on Instagram at JaredDoesHardMoney or find me on Facebook and we'll get together. Now, back to the show.
So we're running short on time, so let's move into our exit questions here as we wrap up this episode, which has been fantastic, by the way. So first one for you, Justin. I think I know how you're going to answer this, but what's one habit or quality you think has been essential for your success?
Man, so when I think about this and when I want to be, get better, learning is like 70 to 80% to get you there, right? But you have to take action. And if you sit there and try to plan it all out down to the T and everything else, and you try to learn as much as possible and have 100% knowledge in the topic before you go and do it, you're going to be waiting forever because you're never going to have everything because there's always something else. There's always a little bit more, right? A little bit more knowledge, a little bit more planning that you can do and everything else. At a certain point, you got to strip that and execute and just start, getting punched in the face. And then, learning and getting better and learning when to put up that block and throw the jab, right? So learning is important. So that's what I'm trying to say. Learning is important, but action is more important because you will learn along the way. You'll never be at 100%. So get to 70, maybe 80, depending on your mindset. But know that you're never going to get to 100 on anything. So just start executing and getting after it.
Awesome. I love that, man. What's one system, tool, or software that's made a big difference in your business recently?
So we have a few different systems that we've used. Go High Level is one that we're implementing, and 90IO, which is, based off of the Traction book, the Entrepreneur Operating System. But honestly, the most important thing that I have learned is surrounding yourself with the right people. And, systems and tools are great. But people are the most important. And I know that sounds like kind of cliche in a way, but honestly, I've surrounded myself with winners on my team, on my ancillary team, like yourself, other, industry partners that do different trades and things like that. And so if you can surround yourself with good people that enjoy winning, you're going to be successful if that's your type of attitude that you're going in it with. So tools and systems are great. They're always changing and modifying and, making things easier and better. But people are really where you're going to, excel your business on.
Yeah. That sounds cliche until you get one person who sucks on your team. And then you're like, this isn't cliche. I'll give up my software. I don't need it. Give me somebody competent.
Exactly, man.
Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Lever Up Your Life podcast. I trust that you'll take and apply at least one word of wisdom so you too can lever up your life. In fact, what I'd like you to do is share in the comments the single best piece of advice you got from this episode. If you want to make sure to catch the next episode, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you'd like to see previously recorded episodes, you can head to my channel at Jared Does Hard Money or find our episodes on any major podcast distribution platform. If you know of anyone who you feel would make for a great guest for this podcast, let us know about them in the comments and we'll reach out. With that, we'll catch you for the next episode of the Lever Up Your Life podcast.